Let's move on to the next session of this conference. We call it Digital Enterprise. Pandemic has created a massive push to move everything on the cloud and the need for new digital approach and data-driven business innovations. Data security and privacy has also moved up the CIO's priority list. This session will deliberate on the essentials of the new work from home model, the network essentials of a smart and dynamic organization, and the evolving cloud environment. I would now like to invite the panelists for this session. We have with us Kapil Mahajan, Group CIO, Safe Express. Kapil is known for his sharp technical and business acumen with expertise in building and executing strategic visions and technology roadmaps that work in alignment with business goals. Our second guest on the panel, Harnath Babu, CIO, KPMG, an award-winning technology executive and digital transformation strategist with more than 20 years of influential leadership with insurance majors and consulting. We also have Umesh Mehta, Global CIO, Jubilant Life Sciences, a turnaround technology leader with expertise in pharma, automotive, and manufacturing industries, delivering the promise of information technology for business. Our next guest, Bimal Khandelwal, CFO, STT GDC India. Ability to exceed with a proven track record encompassing the entire spectrum of finance, telecom, information technology, insurance sector, aspiring for a challenging assignment to outperform in the apex level of any industry quarter. This session is moderated by Mr. Anil Chopra, Senior Vice President, Research and Consulting, Cyber Media Research.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for this session on the digital enterprise. I'm Anil Chopra, VP Research and Consulting at Cyber Media Research, the moderator for this session. Now, one key outcome of the pandemic for every organization today has been massive strengthening and scaling up of the IT and telecom infrastructure to facilitate a near 100% work from home kind of an environment. Now, this was obviously a task in itself, but to make things even more complicated, some roles were required to return to work. In manufacturing, for instance, production of goods required physical presence of people, or wherever there are operations involved, there are many roles that still need to go back to work. So now enterprises have to kind of be rebuilt, keeping this hybrid environment in mind and on the backdrop of a solid digital foundation. Now, adoption of cloud technologies, which was anyways, on an upswing in the pre-pandemic era, has accelerated further due to the pandemic, to ensure that all the critical applications are accessible from anywhere at any time to maintain business continuity. And digital transformation has been top priority with a heavy focus on things like process automation or having a data-driven business innovations, looking at data security, privacy, and basically a digital first approach to everything. Now, this enterprise-wide digital acceleration will permanently reshape the business for the future. And our session, that's why, today we'll deliberate on various aspects of building a digital enterprise, cloud, work from home, intelligent enterprise, and reshaping the business for this transformation. And in order to do that, I'd first of all like to welcome my panelists. I'd like to introduce them all to you. Kapil Mahajan, who is the Group CIO for Safe Express, Harnath Babu, who's the CIO for KPMG, Umesh Mehta, EVP and Global CIO, Jubilant Life Sciences, and Bimal Khandelwal, CFO, STT Global Data Centers India. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Anil. Good to be here.
To start off, I would first of all be inviting each of the panelists to kind of share their views for 5 to 7 minutes on the various elements that we've discussed around the digital enterprise, and then after that maybe have a quick Q&A to kind of discuss those things further. And to start off, I would like to invite Kapil Mahajan, Group CIO for Safe Express, to speak on creating hybrid cloud models. Now, Kapil, would enterprises really find hybrid clouds challenging in terms of governance and redundancy management? Tell us something about the hybrid cloud models.
Okay, thanks, Anil, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'll touch upon hybrid cloud and the challenges it poses. But let me start by first defining what a hybrid cloud is. So typically, a hybrid cloud environment, would incorporate workloads, portability, their orchestration, and also management across two or more computing environments. And I believe comprises of two main components. The first one being the private cloud, which again could be hosted on-prem or could be hosted in one or more data centers that you typically, we all used to do. And the other important component is one or more public cloud services, right? So these two kind of form the core components of any hybrid cloud. And a hybrid cloud strategy, provides businesses with greater flexibility to move these workloads between cloud solutions. So as the needs and the costs of the organizations fluctuate, the demand of the market changes as well. So there are spikes in demands depending on what industry you are in. So you can orchestrate and manage your workloads accordingly, and then hence optimize your cost as well, which typically is not available in a typical private cloud kind of a setup. So typically, the businesses that are adopting a hybrid cloud strategy, they'll start with an IaaS solution and then extend those functionalities to the private cloud. And it could be lift and shift to begin with, and then a more mature organization would talk about cloud native applications, right? So which probably requires refactoring or redoing the entire application to make it really work for the cloud and be native by design or by the core architecture. And to deploy a hybrid strategy effectively, the public and the private clouds, they must be compatible with each other, so they can communicate. So I believe the key or the foundation of a hybrid cloud model is the combination of private and public cloud infrastructures, so that allow workloads to move between two or more interconnected environments. Right. So interoperability is the foundation of a well orchestrated, hybrid cloud strategy. And coming back to the question now, the challenges that an enterprise would face. So, I mean, everyone talks about the pros. So benefits typically would be, better support for remote workforce, reduce costs. Again, I'll always debate that reduce cost component. You can really go bad on the cloud, right? I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, the costs can really, spiral out of control. And then improved scalability control obviously is there. And again, agility and innovation is the key driver for most of the organizations to move into a hybrid kind of a setup or a cloud first kind of an approach now. And obviously business continuity has always been an objective for every organization. So the BCPs are now being shifted to the cloud as well, right? So you could have a private application, but the cloud being the backup, or a multi-cloud strategy depending on how critical your application is. But coming back to the challenges, I think it has a lot of challenges. It's not an easy infrastructure or a easy provisioning to manage. You need to manage multiple vendors and platforms, so that poses a big challenge. It requires certain set of skill set, capability, which is not readily available in the market. So you have to build that capability within the enterprise. You cannot really rely on outsourcing the entire bit, right? So that's important. Another challenge there is, requires the right tools to get a unified view of hybrid cloud application performance, right? So when we talk about APM, typically, it applies to the old world where, you have these application monitoring tools. But the same challenges get multiplied on a cloud environment, because now you have multiple applications running on hybrid cloud setup. How do you get a unified view? You really don't want to increase your support team, and and your challenges are more because of the interoperability, being there, and also multiple points of failures now. Typically when you're running a single monolith application, there's one application that you're worried about. But now you have not only these multiple applications, but they're all scaled or moving across different platforms and cloud environments. And how do you get a unified view becomes a challenge. So you need to have tools in place. For example, we use Grafana, Prometheus, some of the open source stack to get that unified view and manage these applications the right way. Then again, another challenge is portability. So, as I said, it's really important. How do you ensure portability? Or, the APIs or the services that you are creating have to be loosely coupled for this portability and also interoperability to function properly, right? And then another big challenge I would say is reliability and availability, right? And again, it might sound contradictory, but it's when I'm saying reliability and availability, and when I'm talking about loads being split across clouds, it could really become challenging, right? So depending on how advanced your architecture is, because you're always weighing the cost versus the ease of running it from a tech perspective, right? So sometimes that balance can get off, and you're more steered towards cost saving, but that could increase the effort that goes into maintaining in a hybrid cloud application setup. So I believe, coming back to your question, which was, would enterprise find hybrid clouds challenging in terms of governance and redundancy management? They would, but that should not deter them to move there, because the business benefits of doing that outweigh these challenges. And I think the way technology is shaping up, you'll have much better tools coming forward, and the jobs will get easier as we move, as more organizations start embarking on this journey. So back to you, Anil. So that's my view on that.
Thanks, Kapil, for sharing your views. Absolutely, moving into a cloud native architecture is going to have its own disadvantages or challenges, should I say, but then the business benefits can outweigh a lot of these challenges. And good points you touched upon in terms of applications and in terms of what kind of things are moving there, and multiple points to manage, multiple vendors. So just hold on to that thought. I'll come back to you with another interesting question that I have around this thing. So I would like to now, ask Harnath, work from home is, another key component of a digital enterprise. And, it has kind of really redefined office and telecommuting and all that. How do you, Harnath, advise organizations for the return to the workplace, kind of paradigm in view of this complexity and, people centricity that, that needs to be balanced? What are your views around the work from home?
Sure, Anil. I think the pandemic obviously has shaken all of us. It's been quite some time. I think we've come a long way, right, from the time the pandemic has started. I think most of us has evolved. I think earlier we were trying to test waters when we got into the whole idea of working from remote, but I think we are now in the water, and certainly the whole window to the world, I always say, is your laptop, right? So other than that, I don't think you have any other interface as we are sitting and working. Even we having this conversation obviously through a laptop and a camera. So I think we've had very cyclical feelings, right, over the last couple of months. I mean, first, we always felt before the pandemic that it was not possible to work from remote or work from, let's say, in a hybrid environment. It wasn't possible because productivity could be a challenge. I think somewhere you would have that discomfort of people not, being with you when they're working with you, right? Then suddenly we had to go fully remote, and now we were bored with working from remote, so we want to get back to the office. So we partially got back to the office. Then the second wave came, and as the second wave came, we again got back to our cocoons, right? I said, okay, let's stay back and try to stay safe. I think as we are settling back into the new normal, I think to my mind we'll stick to a hybrid working model. I think it's not going to be the same what used to be in the past, right? I think that's for sure, because the whole idea of work itself has changed in last year or so, right? I think one of the important factor as you work in knowledge industry or any industry, right, is the young talent, right? I think most of the working population today, when they were working in the pre-pandemic time, they were coming from their hometowns. They were living with their parents earlier, and then they moved to PGs and moved to sharing rooms and things like that. And after the pandemic hit, they all went back. The one of the biggest resistance that we've seen is they don't want to come back, right? They don't want to come back to the to the office, to the base locations where offices are, because there is an apprehension, and that is number one. Number two, obviously the whole mobility of people from especially the transport ecosystem hasn't really opened up, but still the apprehension is, if I'm able to work from remote, if I'm able to deliver more and I'm able to save time, then why not work like this, right? I think that whole mindset has changed, right? And especially I think to the point that we were discussing some time back is the availability of talent. It's drying up across, right? I mean, people are hiring people, companies are hiring people, people are obviously jumping jobs. And one of the important thing that comes up as a trend is why stick to larger locations, right? If you are able to get the talent in tier 2, tier 3 cities, make them work from remote, then why not let them work from remote and continue to deliver, right? I think that's another big change that has happened or is still happening. Technology has matured, right? I think when the pandemic hit, we did have likes of Skype and maybe partially Zoom to a certain extent, but suddenly we have all sorts of collaboration, communication tools. We practically are doing all webinars and events completely online, right? So the comfort around sticking in front of your screen and seeing the world obviously has set in, right? And obviously technology also has matured, and especially for knowledge organization likes of Slack or any other project management and collaboration platforms have really done that job much more easy, right? Another important thing that Kapil was alluding to was, companies did move to cloud first strategy, right? As pandemic got hit, and they started leveraging hyperscalers to the maximum. I think we are comfortably, as I said, we are having this conversation because there is a hyperscaler which is working in the backend, right? Trying to give us that facility. People have moved on to SASE-based architecture because security becomes paramount. Earlier, people were sitting in the office, you had that comfort. Now you may not have that comfort because people are completely sitting outside in their homes, wherever they are working. So it's like candle in the wind, right? So you have to secure your endpoint. So SASE-based architecture is kind of picking up very fast. New trends around VDI, BYOD is picking up, right? And I think these are all evolutions while they were there in some shape or form, but they're evolving much faster as we are trying to experience the new ways of working. One important thing from our point of view also is, we are intending to have work from home supported for our staff. We are looking at maybe as we get back to offices, we'll look at hybrid working. We are seeing certain percentage of our staff getting onto work from remote work and partly working from offices, which obviously, whatever trends I've just mentioned to you, which are obviously substantiating those trends. Important factor here is organizations will have to start looking at changing the policies, right? There has to be a complete rewiring of policies of how a remote working environment will have to work in terms of and remote and possibly hybrid working environment, right? One of the another important factor which comes to my mind is of the whole pandemic that we have seen, human element was the most fragile element, right? Humans were not available, businesses stopped, right? I think that's been a great learning for many organizations, and we have seen a whole hog of digital transformation initiatives across the board, right? We have seen many companies, and we are working with many of our clients to do the digital transformation. There's so much of awareness around security. There's so much awareness around automation. There is focus on digitalization. AI ML is actually coming into play. If you look at manufacturing organizations, right, they're getting into industrial IoT, creating or working on digital twins to make sure that they're able to better manage their manufacturing infrastructure. So I think some of those changes will continue to happen in the new world, which is completely, I would say, a hybrid and completely automated world. This hasn't stopped with the enterprises, right? And I think if in our own personal lives, our retail consumption, the way we purchase has changed. We have gone to from completely shops, going and buying from shops. We've gone completely online. From healthcare, we used to visit a hospital. I practically don't remember last visiting a clinic. I must have done some teleconsulting, telehealth consulting in last couple of months. So I think a lot has changed, right? And it's not, and whichever entities that are supporting the end users as well, they also have to change as organizations, right? So I think it's a whole, I would say, ecosystem that is going through a change. It is getting tangled, as I would say, right? And each of what we call service that we're taking is related to something else, right? So, and that's what we call as tangling of services. So it's going to be more complex in future. While it's going to be hybrid, but to my mind, it's going to be an exciting times to see in future. What do you, Anil?
Thank you, Harnath. I think really valid way you have kind of put it, how the entire ecosystem has changed, the idea of work has changed. Interesting perspective that, and I think most of us would agree that when was the last time we actually went and met a doctor for anything? Everything is now happening remotely. And I think the same goes for even things like education and online classes and all. Kids have been in front of the laptop for 1.5 years. They've just gotten used to all the technologies, probably know more than it than we do now. So that is the kind of thing that has changed. So yeah, thanks. Good perspective. And I'll come back to you with an additional question, an interesting question that is a follow-on to some of the things that you've really talked about. I'll move to Umesh. Umesh, I think one important aspect that is there in a digital enterprise is really the need to kind of build and manage more intelligence into, enterprise operations. Now, is there now a conflict between intelligence and agility? And if yes, how can enterprises really find a trade-off over here?
So thank you, Anil. Good afternoon. Thank you, Anil, for having me on this discussion. And I would like to start that the consumer behavior is changing in the life sciences industry also. Okay, and traditional blockbuster drug sales models will be supplemented by the personalized therapy treatments, driving life sciences company to evolve business models in a more patient and life cycle service-based context. The nature of biopharmaceutical and R&D and medical device designs and engineering processes will also increasingly become patient-centric. So the organization has to be intelligent and enterprise. And the life sciences industry is being reshaped by three major trends, I would like to call it. Like one is on this empowered patients and personalization. Patients are increasingly taking control of their health approaches and are demanding therapies that provide promised outcomes. Personalized medicines are emerging as faster rates, so with higher price points and improve patient results. So, and the second thing would be the big data, which is driving the health networks, the need to provide therapeutics outcome at a lower cost in transition traditional and fragmenting value chains to new ecosystems that integrate suppliers, contractors, and regulatory agencies also, which is very important in the pharma industry, specifically the regulators, because it is a highly regulated industry. And also, third thing on the regulatory pressures and rising healthcare costs. So as public health issues continues to arise, such as COVID-19 pandemic, with their associated impact on health costs, regulatory pressures will continue. So that is why there is a need to have a sustainable model for especially for life sciences companies, which can have improved customer outcomes, identify customer segments, and service them directly for more holistic approaches than improve quality of life. And also on competing as an ecosystem, driving down the cost and improve efficiencies through collaborations and partnerships for more closely with life sciences networks. Okay, so these are the things, and also life sciences companies will start towards the goal of collaborating more closely with manufacturers and supply to help quality standards of ingredients, packaging, and finished products using customer feedback to enrich customers. So these are some of the things which requires an organization to be intelligent, okay, especially in the pharma side, and also enabling the digital supply chain and smart factories. So digital technologies on shop floor and in supply chain is not new, Anil. What is new is the way of production and logistics are intelligently connected to the rest of the business. That's how now it will shape the industry. So over to you.
Thanks, Umesh. Good perspectives. I think a lot of, as Harnath also mentioned about the ecosystem changing, I think for life sciences, those three trends are really, really kind of reshaping the entire, ecosystem in the life sciences segment, as you rightly said. Patients are more empowered, and big data and all the regulatory pressures. So a lot of changes are happening in the life science, and there is a need now to kind of have more intelligent operations to kind of go along with these trends and embrace these trends. Thank you so much, Umesh. I'll move to Bimal. Bimal, tell us, your views on, how finance leaders are really kind of shaping business transformation and the digital acceleration in this current year and probably beyond that. In terms of, now resilience is not really a choice, but actually a staple during this pandemic. Did it really increase the costs of IT initiatives in the long run? I think it'll be good to hear your perspectives on these aspects.
Thanks, Anil, for having me in this webinar. I would, whatever I share, it would more of echo and reinforce whatever my earlier panel members have shared. In March 2020, a national lockdown was announced. And since then, we have adapted to the new world of work. Business transformation from a digitalization perspective has been a need and was in process already. However, the circumstances since pandemic hit resulted in what we call a digital acceleration. Let me emphasize on three important observations on this subject based on my experiences and knowledge about the change that are required and are taking place. These 3 points will define to a large extent the digital future of finance. Firstly, the finance function and all back-end functions like HR, admin, sales and marketing, legal, and IT have been working from home. It's been 15 months that we have been interacting virtually and taking care of the company deliverables. The need that can be derived from this experience is that of digital upskilling. We have moved to an always on, technology-driven, real-time business. And to support this business, digital skills are required. We need to develop capability and motivation to embrace technology and the new ways of working. From my experience, I can give you examples of embracing technology. Over our monthly GST filing and payments, including reconciliations and annual audits, were managed sitting at home. Interfacing with the tax authorities was done digitally, and we were able to secure income tax refunds for earlier years. We were also able to secure lower TDS certificates. Our internal audits and statutory audits for the quarter and annually was coordinated and completed working from home. We never ventured into our office over last 15 months. So we and our teams must have sufficient competencies required for a digital finance function. Secondly, we need to accelerate adoption of cloud technologies with the right size and right choice vendor selections. As I already said, COVID-19 has forced many finance teams into remote operations. Many organizations will definitely plan to keep some levels of workload permanently remote. According to a Dell report, companies that invest in big data, cloud, mobility, and security enjoy up to 53% faster revenue growth than their competitors. Cloud service providers' proficiency in handling greater volume of data means that they can ensure better security than on-premises or private cloud solutions. The imperatives for CFO is to find the right vendors and at the right time at the right price and deploy solutions in places that will improve the speed, trust, and predictive nature of insights. We at STT GDC India, we are a young organization and have deployed SAP S/4HANA effective April 2018. We have implemented almost all the modules required for our company, which is FICO, SD, which is sales and distribution, materials management, projects, C4C, which is cloud for customers, and we have also implemented cloud for analytics, and SuccessFactors and Concur, all in cloud. SuccessFactors and Concur are integrated with our SAP. As a result, we were able to transition finance employees to remote working effortlessly and efficiently. Customer invoicing and dispatching was made digital, and collections team had to coordinate and ensure that the payments were received in time, sitting at their home and not visiting the customer or the companies. Vendor invoicing workflow was also amended to ensure digital workflow of invoices and approval systems, enabling timely payment to vendors. All this was possible because we had already adopted cloud technology very early, and acceleration of this adoption is now the need of our. Thirdly, the important point that I can derive, which complements my previous point of cloud adoption, is the investment required in finance technology. so that we can deliver more value. Technology is transforming and adding the transition to the CFO from custodian of past transaction to enabler of future growth opportunities. According to the Hackett Group, the top priority, 85% of the CFO and CEO's agenda for most organizations is to uncover new sources of revenues for fuel growth. By using technologies to automate intricate finance processes, CFOs can focus on recognizing new value-added services, such as automatically forecasting long-term real estate value or even predicting pricing of products and consumer behavior. In conclusion, I must mention about the time when experts had to use the expression digital is the future to convince the C-suites to begin transitioning to a more digitally inclusive work culture. The pandemic has made this expression redundant. So, focusing on digital upskilling, adopting cloud technologies, and investing in technology are my three most important points on this subject.
Thanks, Bimal. I think some really great insight from you on business acceleration and some really great examples of how you've managed to do all the financial related tasks which were generally required, probably visiting maybe the offices of the government offices or being present in the office and all that, to be able to do all of that from from home and remotely. And changes in the role of our finance leaders, not just in terms of being custodians of past transactions, but actually looking at future growth opportunities. Some really valid points have come in terms of what financial leaders should really look at in terms of looking at business acceleration and digital transformation and all. So thank you so much for that. I'll now come back to Kapil, who mentioned a lot of interesting perspectives around the hybrid cloud model and having multiple vendors, dealing with multiple vendors, moving so many applications to the cloud and making it into cloud native architecture and all that. Now when we look at moving so many different applications into multiple cloud, I think this obviously increases the complexity considerably. So how can really enterprises gain better visibility into their application performance in such a cloud native architecture?
Okay, all right, Anil. So interesting question. So let me start by first talking about what do we mean by cloud native, right? So typically, cloud native applications are made up of microservices, which are packaged or containerized, right? So packaged in containers, or you call it containerization. And these microservices, are treated independently of each other. So by developers, so that they can focus on the fundamentals of a microservice to program a specialized functionality, right? So typically, if we talk about our world, so you could define it into few silos. The first one would be the booking process when we do the pickups of goods from the market. There would be a microservice for, say, master data management. We call it MDM. There could be another high-level microservice, that takes care of the transshipment. Another one for associate management. There could be another one for contract management, because we are basically a B2B company. So 95% of the revenue comes through B2B, channels. So contract management, itself is very complex, and it could be, you could call it a microservice, but which could be further decomposed into smaller microservices. And then you have the last mile or the delivery microservice, right? So that's how typically a cloud native architecture would look like. And then you would have certain things, that are natively by design need to be there. For example, the DevOps has to be integrated. You should ideally integrate your entire automation, whether you use Selenium or any of the automation tools out there. So now that we understand what is cloud native, I think what is important, going back to your question, in terms of gaining better visibility into application performance in a cloud native architecture, I think it's not very different, Anil, from a traditional APM tools that we used to use, on-premise environments, or even a lot of the companies out there, whether it's Oracle or IBM, they have, if you're using some of their cloud bits, they come bundled, or you could subscribe to an application performance monitoring tool, which would be running on the cloud to monitor your cloud application hosted there. So similarly, for an hybrid approach, you need to figure out what is that right tool that you want to use, because the complexity is more there, and you want a unified visibility as far as possible to manage it better at a reasonable costs, and not really, shooting up your workforce from a AMS perspective. So typically the benefits that you'll get out of it would be monitor an application performance and its availability. You would be able to quickly diagnose and troubleshoot the performance issues as they come up, because you have an integrated approach. You don't really have to dig through the logs. And also, you would be able to improve the application responsiveness and uptime, right? Because that's the fundamental key, and probably the business justification with which you went on the hybrid in the first place. And I think we have the CFO amongst us, so he would not have signed the check had we not told him that everything will run now perfectly. There won't be something called downtime. It doesn't exist in the cloud world, but it does exist. So that's a utopian dream. But if you manage it well, I think it could be a very beautiful architecture that you could give to an organization. And I think so cloud APM tools are out there. You need to figure out what is the right tool that you need to deploy, and they actually help you combine data from disparate monitoring silos into a correlation engine, is what we call it, or dashboards, right? So which makes audit logs easier to read. It saves tech staff from memory dependent and error prone manual correlation analysis. So I think overall, it's not. I would say it's pretty similar to a traditional APM, but just that you'll have to deal with a different set of tools and stack out there, and then make sure try to figure out the one that works best for you. There's a lot of open source APM tools as well, so you could experiment. Like I said, we use Prometheus and Grafana. They've been working pretty well for us. I think it's not fundamentally different. So as an organization, if you are in that journey, you would already be using it. If not, start exploring it, and it'll give you that benefit that you would need in terms of overall visibility and management of your hybrid cloud strategy.
Thanks, Kapil. I think some good perspectives around that. APM tools, traditionally you're using it in an on-prem infrastructure, but the moment you move into the cloud, probably the tool remains the same, but I think the kind of metrics become more important, especially in terms of ensuring that there's no downtime, ensuring that the application performance, response time and all that is, up to the mark in terms of all the various processes, that you also, mentioned, like contract management and all that. So that I think very, very critical to make sure that the performance is up to the mark, and so that the applications respond in a timely fashion. So thanks. Harnath, I'll ask you a question, because you talked about so much of a change in the ecosystem, and some really, how people have moved back, all the young talent have gone back. They don't want to come back to office because they're comfortable, kind of working remotely from wherever they are, and are able to actually, deliver more from home, as you put it. Now, does that really mean that, we have seen the last of physical offices in 2019? Is it that, would the world never really turn, back to the old workplace model? What do you think is really, can we expect to happen in the future?
So Anil, before I answer your question, let me just take 30 seconds to sum up what Kapil and Bimal said in terms of, cloud native solutions to the statutory compliances and regulations. I think we've been working with our clients. We built cloud native applications and made many of our clients to stay home and fulfill their requirements. So just want to touch upon that, and to point of what Kapil said, I think the trend is changing around hybrid cloud. Microservices are picking up, because as you want to scale your applications, certainly microservices are the way to go. So coming back to your question, Anil, as we get back to the offices, and to your point, I don't think the workplace that has changed in last couple of months will continue to stay that way. I think we will get back in a different mode, what we call as hybrid work environments, part office, part remote, part satellite, part big offices. I think it'll be a mode where I think the priority will be more given to employees, right, where they continue to stay productive, And also keeping in mind so typically when you're at home, you may have some distraction. So you would have the flexibility to come to the office, collaborate with your colleagues, go back to home. So that I think it's not going to be any more 9 to 5 jobs in future. It's going to be practically 24/7 as far as you're willing to work, provided you are able to manage your work timings, right? And again, you want to travel to the work and collaborate with the colleagues. I think that change will require a lot of, I would say, cultural rewiring in every organization. It can't be the same organization, what it used to be pre-pandemic to the pandemic to post-pandemic era, right? It's going to completely change. Policies will change, right? HR will have to rethink of every possible policies in terms of, let's say, how do I reimburse the cost of, let's say, internet because the employee is not coming to the office. There's a cost that gets saved for sure, right? You are looking at lesser real estate cost in comparison to the pre-pandemic time. But what will happen is it will have its own share of challenges, right? A disconnected workplace, it's going to be a disconnected workplace for sure. What it used to be earlier, right? You would have watercolor conversations, you could collaborate in a room. I think it's not going to be the same as it used to be in the past. It will be more relying on virtual interactions and face-to-face conversations. Obviously, they had their positives, but I think it's going to be a different environment, right? I think one thing which comes to my mind here is there are two type of things that happen typically when we are having a conversation. That one is the cognitive load that I'm putting onto you, right? When I'm saying I'm giving you a lot of pointers that you're absorbing. Maybe you know about me, so you would be pre-carrying some sort of notion. So that's the cognitive load that I'm putting onto you. But there's an emotional load, right? When it comes to, let's say you're sitting in a room with somebody, you know how his gestures are, hand gestures, leg gestures, or maybe the physical presence, right? I think that's going to be completely missing as we go into the hybrid work environment. So you'll have part of emotional, part I would say cognitive loads coming in, right? So I think organizations and in fact the whole idea of collaboration also will change. Two things that again are important here is the whole angle of people, right? What will happen, right, once people start working from remote or people start working in the hybrid environment, managing remote workers in the different time zones, because now people have decided to work from remote, whomsoever want to, right? And there will be people, set of let's say employees who will be working from the offices. So how will you manage the time zones? How will you make sure that they are exactly collaborating the way it is required to, right? Because you would still have some disturbed patterns, right? Even playing field will be a bigger problem, right? Because people who are working from remote sometimes will get excluded. And again, it's going to be it's going to happen, right? I mean, if you're in the office, I'm having a conversation with you, both of us are in the office, we have that comfort. But somebody, if we need to dial in somebody, or we have to ask somebody to come in on a call, I think there'll be some bit of a disturbance there. I think another critical aspect is the trust factor also has to be building up, because we are talking about not completely remote, but we are talking about a hybrid environment, right? There'll have to be equal participation, which I was mentioning earlier, but there has to be inclusivity as well, right? When people are working from part remote and part to the office. And the most important when working from a people point of view from remote is tracking employee performance, right? I think that's again is going to be an important aspect. So from a technology point of view, I think technology, to my mind, hasn't really fully evolved for the hybrid working environment, right? One simple reason why I'm saying this, because as you get to the office, as you'll have 5 people sitting in a room, 4 people logging in from remote, 5 will be having very good conversation. 4 logging in from remote they will struggle to understand what's happening in the room, number one. If there's a whiteboarding that is happening, you are actually going and scribbling on the board. The guy sitting on the remote, logging in from from home, it will have a difficulty seeing what you're doing. I think the technology obviously has to change. The echoes that happens in the typical audio problems when it happens when you're sitting in room. So today we are able to see each other. You are able to see the minimalistic gestures I'm able to show. You're able to see. But when it comes to environment like that, you will have some disturbances, right? So I think what's important is as we get back to offices is to continue to evolve and continue to watch out for what's happening in this space, right? I think it didn't really take us much time for us to settle in the remote working environment. It will also not take us much time to settle in the working, in a hybrid environment, right? That's going to change. So to answer your question and to summarize, I would say the world is not going to be same what it used to be pre-pandemic. Even the pandemic times, it will change. It will be a hybrid environment. cultural aspects will have to be changed. People have to also start looking at how to deal with colleagues who are working from remote, right? And also understand how technology will come and change their work. You can't be doing the same job what you used to do pre-pandemic time, because all of a sudden, as I said, digital transformation is catching up. So you'll realize that there are 150 bots sitting next to you who are practically working 24/7, right? They're not doing what they maybe 5 of your colleagues used to do over a period of a month. 150 bots does the same job in practically 2 days or 1 day, right? So I think some of those cultural changes also will start to happen. So it's going to be a very hybrid environment, not only from a people perspective, but people and technology point of view. Anil.
Yeah, thanks, Arnath. I think you put it together in a really nice, way that no more 9 to 5 work and a complete cultural rewiring. I am, reminded of a joke that a friend shared with me on Facebook regarding this. That the whistle of the pressure cooker is somehow directly in sync with all the meetings he has. That it goes off the moment he gets into a meeting, and I think we've all kind of faced that kind of a situation. And it does happen, there's a neighbor who's kind of hammering something, or those kind of things happen. So yes, there is a new culture that we are kind of getting into, and it requires more than just technology. Technology has its role, of course, but there's a lot more to it than just technology to kind of have this kind of a complete shift from in this culture. So thank you for that. Umesh, you mentioned so many different things, especially on the new trends and all that, especially about the empowered patients and big data and all the regulatory pressures and all that. Now, how can pharma business really leverage all the opportunities that this throws up, as well as some of the other imperatives that the pandemic crisis has brought upon them? Tell us your views on that.
So, Anil, as Harnath was mentioning, things will never be the same. A lot of things have changed, and we are not going to go back the way we used to operate pre-COVID. And good things happened. Okay, especially I would say for the IT function. Okay, digitalization, and now IT has shifted from enabling business strategy to I would say inspiring business strategy. So and why it was possible? Because of the ubiquitous data, unlimited connectivity, and massive processing power, which during the pandemic was used by almost all the progressive companies. Okay, so organizations, they moved their load to cloud. They tested their connectivity, work from home, so all things, and they also used the massive processing power available on the cloud. And because of this, a lot of things was possible, and organization could see results. I can tell you about my organization. We moved a lot of loads to cloud during the pandemic also. Though we had a cloud-first strategy, but then we fast-tracked that, and our operations were running absolutely fine with no downtime, whatever you say. And also on the industry 4.0. So a lot of acceleration of digitalization happened in the manufacturing locations also for pharma companies, where companies now have started creating data lakes, and from data lakes they're creating data warehouses, data marts, and pulling data from both IT, enterprise IT systems, enterprise OT systems also. Okay, and monitoring them remotely, because in pandemic people were not able to reach, or the right side of people, they were not able to operate. Physical presence was required, but not in full strength. So they could remotely monitor the performance of their OT equipments, how they are running, what kind of yield they are producing, what kind of quality of the products they are producing. So that could happen only because of this remote connectivity and putting data into cloud and monitoring it remotely. So all these things, I think now the organization, they have tasted the pudding, okay, and now more and more organizations. Earlier there was a thing that why do I move my data to cloud? What will happen to my data if I move my OT data to cloud? What will happen? All those things have gone. Also on the customer interaction, Anil, the customer interaction also, earlier it was, we are into B2B, and earlier it was almost 100% in physical, but now pandemic has taught that, okay, you can do virtual meetings also, and almost 1.5 years we have been, our sales teams have been doing virtual meetings only. And I'm not saying that it will be 100% virtual post the pandemic, but yes, definitely I would say it would be 60-40. So 40% will still be virtual. So then there is no need to travel, and some of the things can be done virtually also, meetings. And similarly, on the, as I mentioned, that the pharma industry is highly regulated, so we have to go under a lot of audits. US FDA is one which we have to do. And now, during the pandemic, the US FDA also have come out with innovative ideas of having e-audits. So, so now pharma companies, so they have to upload data into their portal directly from the OT systems. And there is no need for auditor to come and audit and see the plant and the equipment. So everything is online. All the data goes there, and they audit and they see whether the data integrity is there, or whatever controls and checks should be there in the plants, those are there or not. And I think another 2-3 years time, there will be no physical audits. What I see in the pharma companies. So these are the things I think will not change. Okay, and these are good for the organizations also. Okay, and which will improve operational efficiencies also. So back to you, Anil.
Thanks, Umesh. I think thanks. Yes, I think part of it might move back to physical, but a lot of things have started happening virtually, e-audits, and I think Bimal also talked about a lot of the GST filing and all the financial related things happening online. You also kind of alluded to that only. So many things now happening digitally, and that obviously has its own all the advantages. So thanks for sharing.
Anil, I think what will happen is now it not be 100% digital. Also, it will be phygital.
Yes.
So physical.
Yeah, 60-40, I guess. Yeah,
yeah,
you mentioned that. Phygital, absolutely right. So thank you for sharing that. I think Bimal, last question, of course, comes to you. You've heard all the panelists; they've given kind of their shared their views. A lot of things, around having a digital enterprise. The word digital kind of becomes extremely, critical. There's a clear and compelling advantage to going digital. Now, being a CFO, what are some of the financial costs and gains of investing in such a digital infrastructure for any enterprise? I think you might like to sum up that from a CFO's point of view.
Well, thanks, Anil, again. And before I get into that answer, let me echo on what Harnath said about the hybrid culture coming into place. I would fully agree with him. And with the hybrid culture coming in, I think more of the flexibility would be given to the employees as they move forward, whether they want to work from home, come to office, or work from wherever they wish to, which will ultimately have the best of the productivities coming from them. I would fully agree with Harnath. And as we speak about IT and digitization, IT no longer just supports corporate operations as it traditionally has been, but it is fully participating in business value delivery. Not only does this shift IT from a back office role to the front office business, but also changes the sources of funding from the overhead expense that is maintained, monitored, and sometimes cut to the thing that drives revenue. So essentially, IT earlier it was seen as an overhead expenses. Now it would be more of at the front end, and that's what is and would drive revenue. That's my thought on the panelists who shared their views. Getting into your question about the IT spends and all, and what's the payback period around that? Well, IT spends in India, Anil, will touch to somewhere around $93 billion in 2021. This is the Gartner numbers, and it's a growth of 7.3%. It's lower than the global average of 8.5%. Now, that's the spending on IT. But the way we look at it is over last 15 months from the time the pandemic started, and maybe before that also, the investments in IT though were there, but then it got accelerated during the pandemic. It would continue to be there for in the immediate or maybe short-term future, let's say 2 to 3 years. And what we see is it's no more a luxury, it's a necessity to drive the business and have the competitor's edge. For sure, companies who had invested in technology pre-pandemic, they were able to transition to their normalcy faster as compared to the other industries who were not invested in technology. Having seen that, as we move forward, all the companies will fast forward their investments in technology and make it more a competitive edge rather than looking at it as an overhead. So the way the investments in IT were analyzed earlier, the things would change. And it's more of a prerequisite rather than seeing that whether we can invest in IT or not. So that's the view I have.
Thank you, Bimal. I think, very good point. IT is no longer at the back end, but actually, now becomes, comes at the forefront in terms of driving the business. So many changes have happened, and, it's important to kind of make sure that IT is really aligned and at the forefront to drive the business. So very valid point. Thank you so much. With that, I think that was my last question. And with that, we come to the end of the panel. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your views on, these different aspects. I think it was a very engaging discussion. I really, really enjoyed moderating it. Some really, really, great insights have come from all of you. So thank you.
Anil, if I can have one last sentence,
Sure.
if I can just say.
Sure.
See, over last 15 months, at least from STT GDC India's perspective, the way we have transitioned, I think I would want to take this opportunity to thank our IT teams and especially the CIOs who have been working relentlessly during this pandemic and ensuring that all the systems are up and live. And it has been a smooth ride as far as we are concerned. I'm sure for many of us as well.
And from the CIO fraternity, Bimal, I would like to thank data center operators also for helping us running our operations seamlessly during the pandemic.
Thank you very much. And credit for us for this goes to my operations team, and we have been able to ensure that all the services are up and live during this pandemic.
Yeah.
That's what I was referring to as classical tangling, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Great. I think it's been actually a win-win situation, to be able to work so closely together and well coordinated. So I think it's been a great situation in that way. So thanks once again to everyone for sharing your views. And I'd like to thank all the delegates for attending this session on the digital enterprise. I do hope that you found it useful. So with that, we come to the end of today's panel. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, panelists, for such a wonderful session and for great insights that will be duly noted.